Hi, Stephen Lovely here for cordcutting.com. This is the Roku Premiere. It's one of Roku's many devices, and like all of them, it runs the Roku platform. But what makes it different? It's a fair question, particularly for the Roku Premiere, because this device's main claim to fame is that it's a relatively affordable way to watch 4K UHD streaming. But that's also true of the Roku Streaming Stick Plus, so we'd better take a look inside this box and see how this is different from the other Roku devices, especially the Roku Streaming Stick Plus. We'll talk about what it can do, what it can't do, what we wish it could do, and we'll compare it to the other Roku devices as well as to devices like the Amazon Fire TV. Let's take a look. All right, let's take a look inside this Roku Premiere box. First thing we've got here is an HDMI cable. This is just how your Roku Premiere will connect to your TV. You can see that familiar shape. You've probably got one on your TV if it's come out any time in the last decade or two. The Roku Premiere Quick Start Guide. The Roku sticker pack. I don't know if you can see that, but it says I Heart Roku in white. Also here in the cables, we have our power supply cable. One end is micro USB and one end is regular old USB. This end will go either into a wall wart, a plug, or into your TV itself. And the other end, of course, goes into your Roku Premiere. Let's take a look at the device itself. Now, a few things here. The device, is a form factor that Roku used. Form factor, of course, just means shape. That Roku used for a couple of different devices in its lineup, including the Roku Express for a while. They've since changed the shape of the Express, so I'm not sure how long they'll stick with this for the Roku Premiere, but it is a nice shape. And it also happens to be perfect for sticking on the side or underneath your TV, which is exactly what they suggest you do. With this sticky pad, you can peel two sides off of this, and you can stick this here and to your TV somewhere. And the reason it has to be stuck to your TV or on your entertainment center or somehow otherwise facing you is that this part right here, where you peel this off, is where the IR or infrared remote has to point. This is not a point anywhere remote as you'd get with some of the fancier Rokus, and that's one of the differences between this and the Streaming Stick Plus. Let's take a closer look at that remote. And this is where the signal of the remote would leave the remote, which is the case with all the remotes, but unlike some, this one actually has to point at this. And again, that's why you need this to either be sitting on your entertainment center or stuck to the side of your TV with that sticky tape, or somehow or other having this face this. Next we have the wall wart. This isn't strictly necessary because you could also plug this into your TV if your TV has a USB port, but it's nice to have. Not every TV has a USB port. And finally, we have the batteries for the remote. And this is one thing I really like about Roku that not every streaming device company does, is they include everything that you really need to get set up, not just the basics like the device itself and the remote, but also this, the cord that connects it to your TV, and this, the batteries for your remote. These are things that you probably have lying around the house, and I definitely do because I have so many of these devices that I've reviewed over the years. But it's still nice to see them included because nobody wants to go running to Best Buy right after they buy something that needs these things and didn't include it. So since we have everything we need, let's take a look at how this runs. We'll plug it into my TV and I'll show you how it works. Here it is, all set up, the Roku Premiere. Now you notice the Roku Premiere is nice and small, and it has a small remote as well, nice and thin. Very much like the one, in fact identical to the one on the Roku Express, which is the cheaper model. Unfortunately, it doesn't have the bells and whistles that this larger remote has. This one came from the Roku Ultra and has a few things including voice search, and the other thing is headphone jack that this doesn't have. And again, this is a line of sight remote, which means that this guy will have to be out here or perhaps stuck to the side of my TV somehow so that I can make sure that this part of the remote can see that receiver right there. So you won't be able to do a voice search, but it's very easy to use this system, and I think you'll like what I'll show you here. Let's take a closer look. Up close and personal with our Roku Premiere, we can see the interface is pretty familiar to anyone who's used a Roku device before. You've got your main screen here, and this is where all your apps go. I like that Roku keeps their main screen pretty uncluttered. You just got these tiles with different apps. It's reminiscent of Apple TV. Now, the apps here none of them really are Roku's except for Roku's Roku channel, which puts Roku in a position to be relatively neutral about the different places you get your content. This has been changing a little bit as Roku has become more of an aggressive platform in terms of getting money from these different services. But traditionally, it's been really easy to find just about anything you want to stream on Roku, while meanwhile, Google and Amazon might be keeping each other's apps off their respective platforms. For example, there was a long time spat that kept YouTube off of Fire TV because Google owns YouTube. Now, that's not totally true these days anymore, and Roku is not spotless in this regard anymore. They had a problem with HBO Max that lasted a few months and really frustrated HBO users, especially as older versions of HBO were sunsetting in favor of HBO Max. But these days, Roku is back to having a really strong channel lineup, and they have just about everything that we would recommend, including your major sports streaming networks, your live TV streaming services, and of course your on-demand options like Netflix. There's even the Roku channel, which is Roku's own on-demand, ad-supported, free streaming service, which is a very long way of saying it lets you watch stuff when you want, and it is free, except there's ads in it. Loading things up on this is not long at all. These loading times, I think, are pretty comparable to what you would get on the Roku Streaming Stick Plus or even the Roku Ultra, and that's pretty good considering the Roku Premiere is a little bit cheaper. Like the Roku Streaming Stick Plus, and for that matter all of Roku's devices besides the Roku Ultra, this is a Wi-Fi only device, so you might expect it to be a little slower just because Wi-Fi is slower than wired connections, Ethernet connections. But it's really not. Loading times are pretty quick across all of the apps that I've tried, and there's really no problem at all in terms of buffering, loading, or freezing streams. Been very happy with what I've gotten here. Now over here you've got your more advanced settings, the actual settings option, but also the ability to add streaming channels, which again are just Roku's names for apps, the search function, and a few other things. You will have to use the manual search function and type in what you want if you have a Roku Premiere, because it does not come out of the box with the microphone remote, the one that lets you use voice commands and voice search. Overall though, the experience is very reminiscent of the higher end Rokus, and I think that's a testament to how good Roku is about keeping things consistent, even if you're not at the very highest price tier. It's a really great device. The Streaming Stick Plus might have a few advantages over it, but there's really nothing to sneeze at here. This is a really good streaming experience. So there it was, the Roku Premiere. Really great device, and it did very well in our tests. It's a very affordable device, it works pretty well and relatively fast, and it gives you 4K Ultra HD streaming. Now you can also say that about the Roku Streaming Stick Plus, of course, which is very similar to the Roku Premiere. And the difference to keep in mind as you're shopping is that the Roku Premiere does not have the voice remote, it has the regular one. If you want to do voice search and other voice-enabled things, then you'll need the Roku Streaming Stick Plus, and that's about $10 more. Whether or not that's worth $10 is up to you. I tend to find it useful, but it's not strictly necessary, and you'll get all the same stuff, all the same menus and same apps on the Roku Premiere as you would on the Roku Streaming Stick Plus. For more on either device, be sure to check out our other videos and our website, cordcutting.com. If you like this video, I hope you'll like and subscribe. I'm Stephen Lovely for cordcutting.com, and thanks for spending some time with us.